we're going to go ahead. Test. There we go. We're going to go ahead and get started because I want us to move along at least through the rest of the lesson that we have been in for the last couple of weeks. I do want to make sure that I say this at the outset because I want to clear up some matters from our last class that we had. And so I got to find where I marked it. Give me a second. Let's see. It's going to take me a second. If I can find it. I know I highlighted it. There we are. Okay. So, if y'all recall from our last class, we had a discussion on the intent behind the friends of Job. Were they coerced by Satan? Was it their own thoughts that they just let manifest in this situation? What caused this? Yeah, it's Sandy's. What caused this problem to take place? And so, I did, and if you remember at the end of the class, I said a lot of what we were talking about, a lot of what we were discussing was a lot of just guesswork, educated guesswork from what we read in the text, but guesswork nonetheless. Well, it was bugging me Wednesday night into Thursday morning. I am a curious person by nature, and so it was bugging me, and I wanted to go back to see what the text said, and then also what some commentators say. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Commentators do not want to discuss the matter of what the friends' intent was. They only want to discuss, well, the friends were mean to Job. That's what they want to discuss. So I went back and read the text, and I read the text from Job 22 that we have been in. I also read the text that I read last week from Job chapter 3, in which, Job chapter 2, the end of Job chapter 2, in which there were 7 days of silence. And what was the significance of the 7 days of silence between the time that Job's friends arrived and the first speech? If y'all are familiar with James Kaufman, the Kaufman Commentary series out of Abilene Christian Press, some of you who keep commentary sets in your home, you know of the Kaufman Commentary series. If you have been around the church long enough, you at least have heard of the Kaufman Commentary series. James Kaufman, he in his text, his commentary, says that the speeches that you find between Job 3 to Job 37 all take place in those 7 days. He is the only one of any commentator that I have read that holds that position, that it happened that those speeches happened in those 7 days. The text doesn't say that. Actually, the text says the exact opposite. You and I talked about that, Ricky. That the text actually says the exact opposite. That it was a 7-day period of silence They were mourning with Job during that time. So then I went to the Truth for Today commentary series. Some of you know about the Truth for Today commentary series, the red commentaries. And Brother Shackelford, who wrote the commentary for Job, I went through Job 22. I read through his commentary on Job chapter 2. I read through his commentary on the introduction and the preface and all of this stuff. And he does not say hide nor hair of anything connected to the Friends and the intent of the Friends and the significance of the 7 days. So I tried one last commentary that I had in my office. And it was from Brother Homer Haley. And Brother Homer Haley wrote his commentary back in, well, this is the updated version of 1990. Well, it was written in 1994. So this was published in 1994. And he writes concerning the 3 friends and the ending to chapter 2. So he discusses what verse 13 says. Let's remind ourselves what verse 13 says. They sat down with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and they spoke not a word, for they saw that his grief was great. That was what verse 13 of chapter 2 says. Okay? So then this is what he says, and I'm going to read it in its entirety, and hopefully this will kind of explain my position as to why I believe what I believe on this subject, and also give you some clarity on what the text might be understood to say. Was their silence maintained out of a sense of custom or propriety? Was it a further expression of sympathy and compassion and understandable speechlessness at what they saw? Or was it because their theological view that suffering is punishment for sin, which shows up strongly in their speeches, forbade their comforting him? To comfort him under such circumstances would have violated their doctrine. It would have been critical of God's judgment. This view is more compatible with future developments than either of the first 2. As we shall discover, since his grief and suffering were very great, they believed his sins had to be very great. In this light, what could they say that would comfort Job? They were thinking, what can we say that's going to comfort Job? If his sins are so great, what is it that we can say that is going to comfort him? Then this is what struck me. The calamities or misfortunes which Satan brought upon Job may be summarized as follows. 7 of them. The loss of his flocks, herds, and servants who attended them. Number 1. Number 2, the loss of his children, all in one fell swoop of men and nature. Number 3, the loss of his health, as he was smitten from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head with boils that left his body racked with pain. Number 4, the removal to the community ash heap, where he came to be looked upon as an outcast from society. So he drops from this chieftain that we were talking about at the very outset of this, to where he is looked at as the lowest of the low of the society in which he lived. Number 5, the loss of his wife as she lost faith in God's goodness and his care for his suffering servant. Number 6 is what struck me. Okay, this is what Brother Homer Haley says. The friends' silence, which I believe expressed their condemnation of him as being a great sinner. In their defense of error and erroneous view of God, they were being used by Satan in the destruction of God's suffering servant. So, as I pointed out last week, it is my contention that Satan was using Job's friends in some way. Homer Haley seemed to believe that was also the case. And then he says, number 7, the greatest suffering of all, not yet expressed, will be his search for God's explanation of why he has become the enemy of his righteous servant and God's failure to answer. Remember, Job does not know the background of all these strange events. Satan's effort to force him to renounce God. So, that's where we left off last week. And I wanted to make sure that I covered that before we got any further into the text. Yes, sir.
A couple of things I noticed. One, after the 7 days, the friends didn't break the silence. Job spoke first.
Right.
And when Job spoke, he more or less said, I wish I was dead. I wish I never been born.
Yeah.
I think maybe that opened the gates for the friends to start speaking up, to start accusing him of having committed some grievous sins to be suffering so much.
Yeah.
And that may be a cautionary tale for us. We better be careful what kind of actions we ascribe to God. We hear people say a lot of times, well, that was God will. That may not be true at all. I think we need to be cautious about that. We need to be cautious about erroneously judging other people. It's interesting that Satan used these 3 men's religious beliefs to get at Job. I think that's something that we need to take note of.
Absolutely. It's very interesting to see the text and then read some extra sources outside of the Bible to understand that they were in the eastern portion of the Middle East. So they were close to the oriental side of the Middle East. And in that area, and still to this day, if you go over there, this is the belief that if tragedy strikes you, you had to have done something to cause that. And it becomes, as you pointed out, it becomes, well, it's God's will. It's because apparently you did something, so it was God's will that this happened to you. Like you said, we need to be very cautious on what we put towards God in what we say and what we do. We need to be very cautious about that. Yes, Mike?
Our misery is on us. It doesn't come from God. It wasn't God's plan for this type of thing to be put on humans, on us. When we left him, we left his protection. And we now we're succumbed by all kinds of things. Take Chad Taylor. Who would say Chad Taylor has been like they did to Job? Which one of us would say that? Well, that's the reason he's got his tumor.
Right.
He's been bad. What did he do?
And that's the thing, is we got to be, going back to the original point, we have to be careful in what we put towards God. And I will say this to be as even-handed as I possibly can be about the text. Although we put a lot on Eliphaz, Bildad, Elihu, and Zophar, we also need to understand that Job put some stuff on God as well. He also, through his questioning, through some of his questions, he says, why can't I just die? Why can't I just, as you pointed out in chapter 3, why can't I just die? Okay, but that's not the point of this, Job. And then he says, he gets a little bit, I would have to go back and look, but he gets a little bit confused on God's place in this stuff. And as you will see, and as we try to see through the text, Job never once brings up Satan. The friends never bring up Satan. Now, I've heard from people that, well, they didn't know who Satan was at this time. There was no understanding of who Satan was. I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe that for a second. Because of the fact that if you are to believe that stories and things were handed down from generation to generation during this time, then people knew the story of Adam and Eve. Even if they didn't know the full story, they knew something happened to cause them to fall. They knew the story in some capacity. So then it brings up a very good question, and I know we haven't even gotten into our lesson, which I just wanted to make sure I got this all pointed out. It brings up the question of, well, then what do we do about the fact that Satan is not mentioned by the friends and by Job? That's been the question that everybody says. Well, why is it that Satan is mentioned in the first 2 chapters and then he disappears? Well, I'm going to tell you this. He doesn't disappear. Yes, Kenneth.
I forget the president's name. I think it was true. Had the sign on his desk, "Buck stops here."
Yeah.
Well, I guess our mind works that way. God created this. He's all powerful over everything. So therefore, the buck stops there.
Yep.
And ultimately, we view it as he's responsible, good, bad, or otherwise.
And that's where we need to make sure we make that distinction, that God doesn't want the bad stuff to happen. Will he allow it to happen for the fact that we need testing? Sure. Job, prime example. He allows Satan to tempt Job to a certain point.
He kind of went to the extreme, though,
Did he?
Well, I don't think God went to extreme.
Satan did, yes, absolutely. I would say that God did what he always has done, which is, I said, okay, this is my servant. He can be tested. She can be tested.
Job was kind of an extreme example. I mean, he must have been
Yep.
trying to put up everybody else as far as faith goes.
Well, it says in Job 1 that he was, let me go back and make sure I get this right. It says, he was blameless and upright, one who feared God and shunned evil. There you go.
Okay, so don't you think, though, that if they had been allowed to say Satan, that might have put the seed of doubt into Job, thinking maybe this isn't all on God, maybe Satan does have something to do with this.
And that's where I think if you look at the text and you look at what Homer Haley says, then you read and reread what the text says, it gives us even more of an explanation as to why Satan's name is not mentioned by the friends, and Satan's name is not mentioned by Job.
Block that part out.
If Satan was influencing, and again, I know this is an if, but if you read the text, it's really the only explanation. So if Satan is the one influencing the friends, then there is a reason why Satan's name isn't brought up. He doesn't want to, he is trying his dead level best to get Job to turn on God. So he's not going to let the friends say his name, even if, what now? It would tip his hand. Even if one of the friends possibly said something about this could be evil that has come into your life, it would tip the hand, because it says in Job 1 that he shunned evil. So he knew that there was an evil force. So again, yes. Go ahead.
When we experience calamity, where do we find our hope and our strength and our comfort? We find it in God. We don't blame God.
Right.
We ask him for help, for comfort. We'd like a little understanding if you want to share a little with us, but we believe that you are there for us at the end of this life, not now. We stepped away from you, and we're going to have to live in this mess, but you are there for us at the end. And if we will live faithfully for you and with you, you'll give us a home in heaven for all of this kind of stuff doesn't exist.
You're right. You're right. And again, all this reverts back to the prevailing and understanding thought that Job 1 and 2 have a lot of explanation of why things are said and done throughout the book of Job. Is that Satan was behind all of this. I see a look on your face, Ricky.
That does stand to reason, because God said, told Satan he could do anything but not kill.
Yep.
But it is, like we talked several times during this study, what it don't say is just as important as what it does say.
Absolutely. And that's the reason why, we've got to be careful when we actually do start talking about what is in between the lines on certain things that we're talking about in this study, right? Because that if we read too much into the text, then we're not taking away what the text is trying to tell us. But if we don't take enough away from it, we're doing the same problem to ourselves. So we got to find that balance. But in this situation, understanding that Job's friends already had a very skewed theological view anyway, Satan's just going to use that even more. He's going to play on that already skewed theological view, and he's going to take it and ramp it up times 10, and now you find what you have in the conversations. I hope that helps. I'm certain that it probably is as clear as mud right now. That's the reason why I highly suggest that when we do this study, and we are going through this, if you have a question, I don't care, honestly, I'm being perfectly honest with you, I don't care how long it takes for us to get through this workbook. If you have a question, then please stop and raise your hand, wave your hand, flag me down. And if you have a question, you want some explanation, then please let's stop, let's hash it out. Because, hold that thought, Mike, because if we don't, and you leave with more questions than you have answers, then we haven't really done true Bible study that we need to be doing. This is a Bible study. It's not a Bible, I tell you what the answers are. It's a Bible study. Okay, Mike, then Eddie. Mike.
God has a purpose for
Yes.
every book he put in the Bible. And I asked you
Yeah.
last week,
Yeah.
why do you think God put this book in the Bible for us to read and study? What is it? It's a message to us. Okay? What is the message from God to us when we read Job?
Wait till we get to chapter 38. Because actually, and I'm not being a jerk when I say that, but in all seriousness, God does actually explain himself in 38 and 39 and 40. He actually does explain himself as to why this took place. He gives the purpose. Now, over the course of however many years it's been since the book of Job was written, we have come to realize that the overarching purpose, beyond the purpose for Job himself, the overarching purpose for the entire book is to show what Satan can do, then also show that man through suffering can still come out the other side. But with that come questions. And I think my personal opinion is that, and I've said this before, that the book of Job and Job himself show that as a believer, it is okay to have questions. It is okay to have questions as long as you do not blaspheme or turn away from God. I've always had to put that caveat, because whenever I say it is okay to have questions, I always have people have questions as to why I say it's okay to have questions. So I have to put the caveat that it's okay to have questions like Job had questions, but do not turn away or blame God for what is happening. Because there is a reason. And it's not God. Hold that thought, because Eddie was waiting, then we'll get back. Yes.
Sometimes when I would read a book, especially if it was just pleasure reading, I would jump to the last chapter probably first sometimes, because I was one of those that didn't want to read through and get what's going on and who's going to win in the end. So I got the last chapter, read it, and then I see how it got there.
Yeah.
If you go to the last 2 or 3 chapters of Job, I think what takes place, maybe say this first of all, I think we're right in thinking the devil's behind all of this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's sidebar.
Okay.
Another thing, I take the 7, go back to the early chapter, I take that they were definitely silent for 7 days. That was part of the tradition of that
Right,
time.
right.
I don't think they said anything for 7 days. But when you come to the last 2 or 3 chapters, God lights into Job pretty hard.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know about this? No, I don't. Do you know why this animal does this? No, I don't. Were you there when I measured the foundation? No, I wasn't. Do you know this? Do you know that? And Job sat there saying, no, I don't know. And what he says, God finally turns to the 3 friends. He says, Job has spoken the truth, because here's the truth. You don't know what's going on.
Right.
Job has said, no, I don't know what's going on.
Yep.
And the thing is, he turns to them now and says, in essence, you came in here. I think they did come to comfort him. I have no doubt in my mind about that. But sometimes when we have one objective in mind, we get sidetracked somewhere and we end up doing just the opposite. And sometimes that's a human nature. So I think they came in there with good intentions. But I think their answer to all of this was, you had to sin.
Right.
And so they took Job to the mill themselves.
Yeah.
And so what God says to them later is, you go offer sacrifice because you haven't answered truth. You have indicted Job with every sin in the world, and he says it's not a matter of sin. You can't
Yeah.
Because you're trying to save this man his sin. And let me put
Yeah,
this-
yeah.
And here's what I say about life. I think the worst mistake we make sometimes as human beings is trying to figure everything out.
Absolutely.
I had a guy that came today to do a termite treatment on our house. We haven't done annually. And we were talking about the COVID situation. And he's an older man. I kind of appreciate him through the years. But I said something about the COVID. He said, well, all I know is this. I'm just living. I said, you know, some think it's a big fake, some think it's not. He said, in essence, I don't know. Don't really care. He took the shots, he said, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. I don't know if he had it with it. But the point of it is, I think in life sometimes we get ourselves in a mess and we get other people in a mess because we try to figure everything out. And God is simply saying, you don't know what's going on. And I think that's the lesson here that we can learn is.
And I will say this, coupled along with that, Eddie, I agree with you 100% on that. And going back to something you had said close to the outset, is that we have a tendency in Bible studies, especially on Wednesday night, huh? Okay.
They don't like looking at the floor.
Sorry.
They don't really like looking at the
They don't like looking at me, so I don't know why it matters.
They're looking at the floor.
Well, I guess I'll take that, I guess. Anyway, I'll say this: that, and this has been a problem over the years. Eddie can probably attest to this. Any of you who have done Bible classes, taught Bible classes over the years, our tendency is to go to the end and see what happened. Let's find out who won. Let's just get to the end. No, don't do that. Don't do that, because you got to understand why we got here, why we got to the conclusion that is going to take place. If we just skip ahead to, well, we win in the end, at the end of time, we win, and that's good enough, and we just sit here and go through the motions, are we truly doing what we're supposed to do? No. We got to know why the end is so significant for us to get there. We got to know.
That's human nature.
Exactly. Going back to that. Okay, I have a couple of different hands. So, so David, then Dale, then Eddie. David.
Go back to the Garden of Eden. One of the things that happened was that good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil was brought into the world.
Right.
The Bible, we look at it rightfully so. It's the good, it's the hope, it's the end. We do know the end of the story.
Right.
And we celebrate that, and that's our hope. The Bible also teaches the other side of that fruit, the evil of the world, so we can see how it manifests itself, where it comes from. If you go back to the story of David, when he was tempted by Bathsheba, you look at all the things he did. Satan's not mentioned as being tempted. But we can see how subtle that is. So we learn as much about the wiles of Satan
Yep.
if we look at those stories. And it's not so much that Satan is using these other people to accomplish what he wants to do. Get after Job.
Yeah.
Evil exists. And we need to understand how it manifests itself. And we are pawns in that battle between good and evil. And we're going to choose a side. Our lives will reflect whatever side that we're on. And evil's going to be punished. But you go back to the Garden of Eden, the knowledge of good and evil came into the world, and that's what we're looking at here.
Right.
We can learn all kinds of good things about Job. We
Yeah.
understand the patience and all of that, and his character, without question. But we can also
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Yes, Dale.
Kind of building on what Andy said. We are finite creatures. God is infinite creature.
Yep.
There's no way we can understand why. Or we can ascribe God did this, God did this. We don't know God when God is acting in providence.
Correct.
These three friends, before we get too hard on them, there is a biblical basis for what they believe in both the Old and New Testament.
Uh-huh.
It says God chastises those that he loves. And so,
Yep.
but not, every time something bad happens, it's not God chastising.
Correct.
And so, we have no way of knowing one way or the other.
Absolutely. You are exactly right. Biblical examples throughout Scripture show that God did chastise his people who did something wrong. He did. That's what he did. But at the same time, we need to also understand the reasoning, as we've been trying to point out. We need to understand the reasoning behind a lot of what we are going to be. Because as you have now seen, now that we're getting into the third cycle and we're getting close to Elihu coming onto the scene, these friends have become even more brash in their statements. Job has become more brash in his calling out of his friends. And so now it's become just one big fest of let's just talk at each other. And this is what I want to say. And so that's going to manifest itself into what Eddie said back a few minutes ago, which is by the time God comes in the whirlwind, God just is like, okay, I'm going to talk, you're going to answer me, and for a whole chapter and a half, he doesn't let Job have an opportunity to respond. And if I was Job, I wouldn't want to respond to God. Nuh-uh. You couldn't get me. I remember how mad my dad got when I would do something stupid. What if God showed up to you and said, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to answer me? Do you really think you want to answer God? Especially after some of the things you've said? Nah. And even when Job talks, it's 3 lines, and he says, as you pointed out, I don't know anything, and just please continue. That's pretty much what he says. He knew not to say a word, and that's the reason why I find when God comes onto the scene, although it's very serious in how he comes, and we haven't even gotten there yet, but when God comes onto the scene as far as talking to Job through the whirlwind and everything, although it is a very serious moment and a very humbling experience, at the same time, it's kind of comical in the way that he's almost looking at Job and saying, were you there when the worlds began? No. Were you there when I put these sounds into these animals? No. And so it just becomes this thing. And I think at that moment, and as I pointed out to Mike at the beginning of this, God wasn't behind this at all. This was never God behind this. And so, anyway, Eddie, did you have...
I'm fine.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments? We did...
I wouldn't want to suffer like Job,
Right.
but wouldn't it be great if you had that kind of faith that God knew that you wasn't going to turn? I mean, wouldn't that, that would just, well, that'd be horrible.
I'm going to say this, since he actually put it on Facebook, so I'm going to be able to actually say it. if any of you are on Facebook, you saw Chad's post last night, just before you went to bed, and what he said. And what he said highly reminds me of Job. That even through suffering, even through torment, even through the problems of this life, you ain't gonna turn me that easily. If you don't have Facebook, this is what he said. He said, I'll be going in at 6 in the morning. I'd like to ask for one favor. Well, it'll be more than one, but please do it in this order. When you get a chance, pray to God and ask him to be with everyone down here and across the world who need prayers. Ask him to be with people you know who are going through things and need him. Ask him to help you be a better Christian that day than you were today. Not that everyone is bad, but because we need to get as close to him as we possibly can. Lastly, if you will, pray for my family and then pray for me. I'm not trying to play games. I want people to know where I am. I'm nervous. I'm anxious. I'm scared. I'm not ready to go. But if it's his will, I hope to be with him for eternity. I love you all, and it's not fake. Time just separates us a bit as we get older. We need to work on that. Please be in touch with my family. Hopefully, God willing, I'll be back soon.
And as close as we are to that situation, we still don't even understand that.
I was talking to somebody, I can't even remember who it was today. And I said, I can't even, and by the way, as you probably are aware and could guess, we never even got into the book tonight. I'm over trying to make it past even one question sometimes on our Wednesday night class, but I'm actually fine with it. I was talking to somebody, and I told them, I said, you know, what bothers me more, and this is going to take us into the Devo, so as people start coming in, they can just start filing in. What bothers me more is, you know, in the church today, we have in the church world, we have this prevailing thought about faith that, you know, just have a little bit of faith, a little bit of faith, a little bit of faith. That's all you need, a little bit of faith. My dad has this sermon that he would preach. He still preaches it in gospel meetings called Brill Cream Religion. You know what Brill Cream is? You remember the jingle to Brill Cream? A little dab will do you. Well, think about that in connection to religion. A little dab of faith will do you, and that's what they believe. What a lot of people in the religious world, come on in, guys. If you're in the back, come on in. They will say a little dab will do you, just a little dab will do you, a little dab will do you. But it takes more than just a little bit of faith. You need to have faith like a mustard seed, and it can move mountains. And it's amazing when we do read things like what Chad posted on Facebook. That kind of faith is the kind of faith that we all need. And when I read what he wrote, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, and y'all are going to think, y'all are going to say, well, that's shocker. But I cried. when I read it. The reason I cried when I read what Chad wrote was because of the fact that what Chad wrote showed me that I need to work on my faith. And I think it showed a lot of people that we need to work on our faith. And again, we read texts such as 2 Timothy chapter 4, where Paul writes, I fought the good fight, I finished the race, I have kept the faith, and henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. You want a modern day version of 2 Timothy chapter 4, read Chad's post. He says, if it's my time, it's my time. I know where I'm going. I mean, how amazing is that, guys? Let me also point you to another text. And for those of you walking in, I segued all of this, all of our class into the devotional. We're talking about faith. We're talking about we discussed what Chad had written on Facebook last night just before everybody went to bed. And so we read that. And thing is, even at the end of close to the end of Paul's life, he even says to the Corinthian brethren, he says to them, I've had this thorn in my side, and I asked the Lord 3 times to take it away from me. Right, Eddie? He says, Lord, take this thorn away from me. 3 times he says this. But what does the Lord say? My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, and this is what he says, this is what Paul writes, therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, and in distresses, for Christ's sake, for when I am weak, then I am strong. And for us, we can't we try to understand it. We try to read that text and say, well, I want to be that person. But at the same time, guys, this is where we need to work on ourselves and work on each other and help each other. Is because the beauty of the Bible is that it shows us these faith stories so that we have an example of our faith story. Us building our faith. We are supposed to build upon the faith of others that have come before us. Don't believe me? Go to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, 1 and 2 is probably the single best text that is not in a previous chapter that should have been in the previous chapter. Hebrews 13 should have started at verse 3, and Hebrews chapter 11 should have ended with verse 2 of what is commonly known as chapter 12. Because chapter 12, 1 and 2 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight, every sin, every persecution, every suffering, everything. Let us lay aside all of that because it so easily entangles us, ensnares us, takes us away from God, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despised the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The beginning of Hebrews 11 talks about we have faith in things that are hoped for, faith in things that are not seen. We have that kind of faith, and if we have that kind of faith, we have the kind of faith that all of those people in Hebrews 11, the hall of faith, as it is dubbed, if we have that kind of faith, then we can run the race. And at the end of our life, we can say, I fought the good fight. I've kept the faith. Here's the thing. What are we doing with our faith? Are we sitting and not saying anything because, well, I've put in my time. Now it's time for someone else to come in behind me and tell people about Jesus. I've put in my time. I'm going to rest for the remainder. No, up until the day Paul died, he was still preaching. Up until the day he died, he was still preaching. Up until the day that Peter died, he was still preaching. Up until the day that all the apostles died, they were still preaching the word. So are we going to, quote, retire from faith? Or are we going to work, as the song says, till Jesus comes? Are we going to put in the time so that at the end, when all the chips are down, whether we die before the Lord comes again, or whether we are in this place when the Lord comes again, are we working to that end? What's the invitation song?
Are you washed in the blood?
Are you washed in the blood? The invitation song is Are You Washed in the Blood? Folks, I'm going to leave you with this. I'm not trying to be this emotional, like, better felt than told preacher right now. I'm just telling you, do not leave out of here not having some kind of relationship with Jesus Christ. Whether it is that you are a Christian and you have fallen away and you need to come back, or whether it is you are not a Christian, you've never put Christ on in baptism, and you need to be baptized tonight to wash your sins away, calling on the name of the Lord. Whatever it is, folks, we're here for you. We love you. God loves you. And He wants you to come home. Are you washed in the blood? Will you stand as we sing this song?
Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace, His power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the blood, in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Lay aside the garments that are stained with sin, and be washed in the blood of the Lamb. There's a fountain flowing for the soul unclean. Oh, be washed in the blood of the Lamb. Are you
those watching by Facebook and YouTube, thank you for being with us tonight. And we hope that this lesson has been a blessing to you both in the devotional and in class. We hope those both have been blessings to you. We also want to remind you that we will be back with you at 10 o'clock on Sunday, live streaming that service as well. We look forward to that Sunday as well. For those here in the auditorium, we're going to have some announcements after the close of the live stream, so please stick around for just a few moments so that those announcements can be made. Thank you again for being here. May God bless you. May God give you peace, and we hope to see you again at on Sunday, and have a great week.
All right. A common love for each other, a common gift to the Savior, a common bond holding us to the Lord, a common strength when we're weary, a common hope for tomorrow, a common joy in the truth.